FIDE Master Kigigha Bomo takes on Chimezie this Mass at the National Friends of Chess 2024. So we have a shake of hands.
On the right side of your screen, we have FM Kigigha Bomo starting with white. We have pawn to c4. We have pawn to e5, the English opening. We have pawn to g3. We have pawn to c6. Now, both sides are pushing their pawns in the center. Now we have knight to c3, knight to f3, attacking the e5 pawn, and black decides to push the pawn, becoming more ambitious right from the opening. And we have knight to d4, we have knight to f6, defending the pawn, and then we have bishop to g2 now, attacking the pawn. Now we have pawn takes, and then knight to c3. We have pawn to a6, the first mistake of the game, but here white decides to castle without punishing it. Now we have bishop to e7. The better move here was bishop to c5, developing the bishop with tempo, and here he decides to attack the center now. It's pawn to e6, pawn to e6. Now black goes deep in the position and tries to figure out, should he capture the pawn or should he simply castle. But he realizes that if he castles instead, he's going to lose the pawn for free. So he thinks a bit and decides to capture the pawn. And now we have king captures almost instantly. Now we can notice something about the position, that we have three attackers attacking this isolated pawn in the center. Here black decides to castle. So now white decides to go deep in the position a bit, tries to check the nuances of what he should do and what he ought to play in this position, what are the key ideas for him. And like I said before, the key idea in this position now is to attack this isolated queen's pawn with as many attackers as possible in two strategies. The first could be by exchanging the defenders of this pawn and then bringing the rest of the attackers to come on and finish the pawn, such as an important defender would be something like the knight here. So a move like bishop to g5 would be a great idea, but here he decides to bring his rook to d1, still mounting enormous pressure on this center pawn. So once the knight leaves to either f4, f5 or f3, or wherever, once the knight leaves the d5, we can realize that there will be enormous target on the pawn. And here white, this kind of position requires a very high level of accuracy from black in order to keep the game rolling. So he thinks a bit, and the evaluation bar already paints it that white has already gotten an advantage early on in the opening and needs to work on his advantage more. So here we have knight to c6, offering an exchange of piece, and white declines. Knight to f5, although a better move in the position would have been simply activating the bishop with bishop to e3. Knight to f5 in this position simply shows that he doesn't want to exchange for this knight, so that black will not be able to strengthen his weaknesses on this side of the board, because it is not easier to attack the d5 weakness than attacking the c6 weakness instead. And there black thinks a bit, should he capture this knight, or should he activate his rook, or should he develop his bishop to e6. So there are so many ideas here. Black is thinking of, he reaches out for his bishop and then plays the move bishop to e6, activating his bishop. But now we have the move bishop to g5 in the position. Now the idea of this move is to try and exchange one of the key defenders in the position, and now we have a very key mistake in the game. Now the best move here for white would be to simply capture the dark square bishop, and then after queen takes, we can either win a pawn now with knight takes, or we can start with bishop takes knight. There are so many strong ideas here for white in this position. So white thinks a bit. You can see the level of focus from both players. They are trying to find the best moves in the position. You can see here that that here that the idea is being played out. Both sides are trying to find interesting ways to handle their positions, although it's not an easy task. But he decides to retreat the bishop back. So the idea of retreating the bishop may be to try and keep the bishop along this diagonal, because it's a monstrous piece. And here we have rook to d1, and here we have a6, and then the rook to c1, rook to c1 here on the board, and then we have rook to we have rook c1, and here rook d0, and we have a key mistake in the position. The better move here for black would have been to pawn push in this position, and the idea is to try and gain a little space in the position and make this knight to become uncomfortable. And but now with this move rook to d7, now we can find the move knight to a4 like he has played in the game. Now the idea is to now plonk the knight either on this square or this square, trying to attack a defender of the position, or to just try and extend his influence. So the best move here is to simply remove this rook over here, so that this rook, because this rook has more squares, this rook has more squares than this particular rook, so he considers the position greatly and makes a mistake with rook to d8. Now, like I said, this rook had more squares than this one, and here it is much easier now. He just needs to find this move knight to b6, winning the rook. Yes, knight to b6 wins the rook, is a great move, and we have the second great move of the game. The idea is that this rook doesn't really have much good squares to go, because the bishop controls the squares and the knight controls here and here. So the best move here, according to the engines, is to simply sacrifice this rook for the bishop, because the bishop is a stronger piece in the position according to the engines. But here, looking from the human's perspective, he decides to just bring his knight back to d7, which is a mistake. And here we have knight captures rook, we have rook takes knight, and now we see that the bishop's influence is still felt on the board because of the scope of its coverage. There's no other dark square bishop on the board, so the bishop is like a roaring lion looking for who to destroy. But here, instead of moving this bishop around, we can just simply harvest this pawn in the center with bishop takes pawn, and then the bishop takes pawn, queen takes, and of course we are threatening to win the knight, so he can't even win this pawn as a compensation for that. So he looks at the position, tries to confirm if the move is good enough to be played, looks again, tries to confirm, recalculates everything. Is the pawn what's been captured? I hope there are no tactical ideas that I am missing in this game. Looks deeply, the level of focus and intensity from both players is still remarkable. Both sides are giving it their best, and yes, he decides to go for the pawn. Yes, bishop takes d6, bishop takes d5 at winning the pawn, and we can see here that everything things fall apart in this position as bishop takes. Now we have bishop takes and knight to f6. The simple move is to just bring back the bishop to bring back the queen to either here or here, and decides to bring his queen here to d6. After rook attacks the queen, we have queen to e3, offering a queen exchange and also a rook exchange also. So rook takes, we have rook captures, and it is not a wise decision for black to trade queens in this position. The key idea for black is to try and maintain pieces on the board and try and find as many complications as possible. So he treats his queen back to f8. Not a happy move, but it has to be played instead. White roots out and plays the move pawn to b4, gaining space on the queen side now, and also making a knight a bad knight. And we have knight to e7, and white finds this brilliant move, bishop to d6. The idea now is to force as many exchanges as possible on the board, and black cannot resist these exchanges now because they are forced. And now we have knight to f5. White can simply start by winning the queen here, and after knight captures knight, we can place our rook now defending the bishop and then threatening a lot of things. So he's trying to move bishop takes knight, and after knight takes queen, we will not recapture here, but we'll rather play rook to d8 to defend the bishop, and then yes, he finds the move rook to d8, and we have knight retreats instantly. We have bishop check, king comes back and bishop captures knight. We have knight captures, and we have rook to b8, attacking the b weaknesses. And after pump, we see that the rook now begins to attack everywhere on the board. We have knight attacks rook, and the first pawn begins to fall. We have knight here attacking, trying to attack. We have king defends. We have knight comes up, and the rook to a5, attacking the b5 weakness. And here we have knight check. We have king comes in, and then knight attacks the rook and the bishop, the pawn and the rook. And now he decides to capture this pawn. Decides to capture, and now classy move rook to c5, cuts off the knight from every square, and then the king tries to come in, and here we can see that the knight is trapped already. And after this here, and then after king comes, we can see that there is nothing. The knight cannot be saved, and black resigns. Kindly like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for now, and this is David signing out. See you in the next video.